Welcome, everyone, to this week's Into the Wilderness podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Byron Pace. It is Thursday, the 5th of March, 2020, and I'm in Northern Ireland for this one, recording a show with Alex Rodgers, who is the gamekeeper at the Irish Grouse Conservation Trust. He is the only full-time employed gamekeeper in Northern Ireland, and we're going to be hearing all about the conservation work that they are doing to restore a landscape back to its former glory. They just picked up the Gold Purdey Award for conservation, so we're going to be hearing a little bit about that as well. As always, we would like to thank the people who help make this show possible, and that is our Patreon supporters. And our top-tier supporters this week include Richard Stevens, Richard McNeil, Ronnie Speakman of rdcontracting.co.uk, Chris Griffith, John Henry Pete, Tom McCraith, James Benjamin Normandale, James Marchington, and the guys at South Ayrshire Stalking. A big apology to Chris Griffith, John Henry Pete, and the guys at South Ayrshire Stalking, because for the last 2 weeks I completely left them off the thank you list. They are three of our supporters who paid for an entire year all in one go, and so we're not on a new list that I made up to make sure I didn't forget anybody, so I completely failed in that regard, but hopefully I'm making up for it now. I also have another apology, because I completely screwed up the Guess the Sound competition 2 weeks ago. I said that the previous sound had been a hippo, and it hadn't at all. It was a capercaillie, which sounds nothing like a hippo. If you would like to know what the sound was from 2 weeks ago and the winner, it was, and I think pretty much all of you got this right to a greater or lesser extent, it was a carrion crow. And the winner, picked at random from a list of correct entries, is James Winrow, who was also somebody who pointed out that I had completely messed up the previous competition. So thank you very much, James. I had realized, but you weren't the only person to point that out. You are the winner of the latest issue of Modern Huntsman, which is Volume 4. Now, for those of you who pay careful attention on social media, you will see that pre-orders for Volume 5 are now available, and we are doing a reprint. So there are currently pre-orders for all the old issues, so you can now get your hands on Volume 1 and Volume 2, which have been out of stock for a while. Head over to thepacebrothers.com and click on the shop, and you'll be able to see all of the options available there, including a very cool box set for the first 4 issues. We are going to give the Guess the Sound competition a break this week, but I'm still going to give you an opportunity to win a copy of Modern Huntsman, and I'm not even going to restrict it to the latest issue. We are going to open it right up now that we are doing reprints. The only thing is that you might have to wait a little while until they actually arrive back in the UK. But whoever wins this week, you can pick whichever volume you want. So if you happen to be missing one, now is your opportunity to fill that gap. What we are going to do is anybody who helps by supporting us on Patreon from now until the next show goes out in 2 weeks' time will be entered along with all of our previous supporters into a pile, and I will randomly select somebody next week, and one of you will have the chance to tell me which volume of Modern Huntsman you would like to have sent out to you. So you can help support us for as little as $1. So we're not asking for a huge amount, and all of the support makes a massive difference for us to be able to create these shows. So head over to Patreon/PaceBrothers, show us some support, and in 2 weeks' time, one of our supporters, either new or old, will win a copy of Modern Huntsman. Now, I've been mentioning this on the last couple of shows. 8th and 9th of May 2020, Yorkshire Events Centre. It is the Northern Shooting Show. It will be the first show that we are going to this year. I can't wait. It is not far away from where I sit right now. It's going to be a great show because it always is. I completely screwed up the website address that I gave 2 weeks ago. So just Google the Northern Shooting Show, and it is the first thing that comes up to read all the information and how to buy tickets. I look forward to seeing you there. Look me out. And I think that's about it for me. Let's jump straight into the show. Alex, welcome to the Into the Wilderness podcast. You've been kind enough to show me around the estate today in a very wet Northern Irish winter. We're not quite in spring.
Yeah.
Thanks for arranging the weather for me. It was very good of you.
It's definitely not been the best of days today.
It's been pissing down with rain all day. But it's been an amazing opportunity to come here. And I've still got a full day tomorrow, which is supposed to be better. So I'm hopefully going to actually see some of the hill because most of it was covered in like fog and low cloud all day. We first met 2 weeks ago, I think, or 3 weeks ago.
4th of February.
Oh, there you go. You've remembered it. At the Purdey Awards evening for the Purdey Awards.
Yeah.
And when we had met, it was like before the announcements of the winner, so you didn't know that you'd won yet.
Yeah.
If you haven't heard of the Purdey Awards, you can look up all of the previous year's winners on the Purdey website, purdey.com. Go and locate the About Purdey tab, and all of the info is on there. The awards were set up and established in 1999 by the famed gunmaker James Purdey and Sons, who are arguably the most famous and respected gunmaker in the world. And even back in the late 90s, the company realized that there was a need to recognize the value of shooting in conservation, where indeed it legitimately occurred, because otherwise it would be very hard for the public to appreciate its place in modern culture. They wanted to highlight and promote the good work in conservation being done across the whole country on the back of shooting interests. And so, the Purdey Awards were born, with an open invite to submit evidence of positive improvements for ecosystems and wildlife. Today, it is a revered achievement, recognised across the whole country as a gold standard of what progressive, sustainable hunting should aspire to be.
The process began because we were originally an entry years ago. We'd applied, I think it was back in 2011, and we'd got through to the final stage and we'd been awarded the bronze, which was absolutely brilliant. It was an amazing achievement. But the way everything's the successes that we've had just in the past, or since 2011, the project's grown and it's gone from sort of quite low to quite a high achieving, more in many aspects. So we decided to put in for it again, and hopefully, fingers crossed, we would have liked to have got gold,
and you did.
And amazingly enough, we'd won gold. So
quite a room of people to be presented with something. I mean, it was the Duke of Wellington's house?
Yeah, Duke of Wellington's house.
Number 1 London.
Yeah, that's it.
Number 1 London. And imagine that being your postcode.
Yeah. And I'd also been told that the paintings up on the walls, if they were to sell one of those paintings, that would have covered the cost to knock the house down and rebuild it again.
So here is a little bit of British history for you. The Duke of Wellington was one of the leading military and political figures in 19th century Britain, serving twice as Prime Minister, and famously defeated Napoleon in the Battle of Waterloo. Many of the paintings that were on the walls of the night of the Purdey Awards celebrated this very victory. Although it has to be said, he seemed to have a strange fascination with collecting portraits of Napoleon. I wasn't entirely sure if this was the Duke of Wellington's way to gloat in victory, or it was some sort of reverence to his greatest adversary. Who knows?
Yeah,
I didn't know that. I mean, the oil paintings, and they were amazing. There was one oil painting which was like, I don't know. I mean, it must have been 5 meters wide.
Yeah,
and it was of the last time they had a dinner celebration. Yeah, that's the dog flapping its ears. The last time they had a dinner celebration for the Battle of Waterloo.
Yeah,
which was everybody in their red jackets celebrating victory.
Yeah,
Incredible room.
Yeah, brilliant room, and luckily, one of my bosses, Peter Mackey, who's the chairman of the Irish Grouse Conservation Trust. He came with me, and I think he was more excited to be able to go into Aspley House for the first time. He was very much like myself. He was optimistic. He didn't know whether where we'd been placed. It was a close call. the reasons for the doubts were more because of Peter Mackey's previous experience when putting in for the Purdey Award. The last time when they'd been awarded the bronze, there was a lot more contact.
Oh, really?
And they kept ringing up and asking, have you definitely booked your flights? You're definitely coming over. And this time there was absolutely nothing. It was
you just had a date.
An invitation was sent through, and we'd heard nothing else back. So I know Adrian had also thought the same thing as well, and he was like, "Oh no, they've not been in contact like they were last time, and I'm not sure about this." So just with that sort of glimmer of doubt, like to be awarded the gold just made it even more special.
Just to rewind a little bit and explain the Purdey Awards, why it's a big deal.
Yeah.
Like in terms of conservation awards given in the UK, it's one of the most prestigious. Why is it a big deal? What's the application process like? Because it's quite involved. From my understanding.
Because the competition's set so high, you're up against some of the best estates or farms, in the UK. So the application process, it's pretty stressful because you're trying to cram as much as you possibly can into one document.
It's like the Michelin star of conservation here.
Yeah. So we definitely hadn't rushed it. We didn't want to rush it. We had thought about sending in an application in 2018, but we just wouldn't have had the chance to get a document together that we thought would be suitable enough, for the award. So we decided to hold back, and we had maybe 6 or 7 months time to work on the application itself. We had a lot of help through from each and every one of the directors of the IGCT.
IGCT?
Irish Grouse Conservation Trust.
Okay. Clock that.
Yeah. So they'd had a huge input. It was a team effort. Because the project has been running since 2008, we had a lot to get in there. Like the most crucial thing that that had to obviously be in the application was the fact that the grouse moor only had 5 pair. There was only at the very early stages of the project, there was a grouse count conducted, and there was only 5 pair of grouse on the entire hill.
Okay, so I'm going to pause here for a second because that's quite staggering. We've talked about a lot of things which we're going to cover again today in the podcast, but that stat you never mentioned when we were driving on. Right. 5 pair, 10 grouse. On this whole place.
On the entire place. So the place is 7,000 acre. Good heather ground would be 1,000, maybe 1,100 acres.
And historically, there would have been a lot more grouse here.
Historically, this was probably one of the best grouse moors in the whole of Northern Ireland.
So what happened?
What happened?
When you say historically, what, 50s, 40s?
Yeah, like back in the 50s, down at the estate, down at Glenarm Estate, there's Lord Dunluce still has the original, the real old game book, which dates back to like the 20s, and like there's still records in there of grouse being shot off Glenwerry up to 100 brace days. So it has always been shot and managed for grouse up to maybe, I think it was maybe the 70s when there was just a complete lapse in any gamekeeping, predator control.
All the formal management that's associated with driven grouse shooting had ceased.
That's right. Any form of upland management other than a bit of sheep grazing, it was all all finished. Forestry up to 2,000 to 2,500 acres of forestry was planted
on the heather moorland.
On the heather moorland, so that had obviously taken a huge size of the hill as well. But as well as that, it had also attracted a lot of predators to the area.
And when you say predators, what are we talking? Give people an idea of what is classed as a predator here in Northern Ireland.
So our main issue for Glenwerry itself would be the fox. The foxes are through the roof. There's no other estate that or hill that manages the hill for grouse that would have to deal with the extreme level of predation by fox. The fox population just in Northern Ireland itself is absolutely incredible. It's gone from being quite a low population in, say, like the 70s and 80s, and then during the 90s, it's just the population is just risen.
You were giving me an amazing little anecdote of how rare it was to see a fox back in those days, which is complete contrast to now.
Yeah.
Just tell me that story again so that everybody can hear it.
Jack Ray, who's still here, is 85 now, and he lives in a little cottage up the road, and he always tells me a few old stories of back in the day. He can remember when the grouse were here. He can remember beating when he was a young lad. He once told me a story. His father was out tracking in the snow, and he come across fox tracks, and he followed them right across the hill for about maybe just over half a mile, and he found a rock, and the fox had actually gone underneath this rock, and he'd gone to stand on top of the rock, and a fox had bolted from underneath his feet and had shot it. And for days after that, there was every farmer in Antrim and the Antrim Glens were coming to Jack's house just to see this fox, because
it was such a rarity.
It was so rare.
I bet nobody comes to see your foxes now.
No one's interested in foxes anymore
because they're so abundant.
Yeah, they're everywhere. They're a real pest now. Back when Jack's father was a keeper, I dare say it was maybe a privilege to shoot a fox, or even see one. So, and since then, they've just completely got out of control.
I wonder what the reason is for that.
I think it's a multitude of reasons. I think one, farming's a lot more intense now than what it was back in the 50s and 60s. There's a lot more livestock out on the hill. There's a lot more food source for them. There's a lot of ewes do die, and not all the time. If they are out in the middle of the hill because it's so remote, you might not be able to get them off within a couple of days. So wherever there's sheep, there's vermin. Just even with the forestry alone will have housed a lot more foxes
by just creating the shelter for them to den in.
That's it.
And what about other types of predators?
Ravens are really bad. Okay. Extremely bad. Grey crows, they're quite bad as well. Grey crows are quite easily dealt with. We'd be up to maybe 200 grey crows a year.
Which come under, I assume, your version of the general license here. So there are vermin species which you can control without additional permitting.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. So in Northern Ireland, hooded crows are on the general license.
Mm-hmm. And, we often, when we're discussing predation control on grouse moors, it's very obvious that the main incentive is for the harvesting of grouse. But you've given me loads of amazing examples as we've been driving around today, and you've been showing me different types of habitat management and telling me some of the history of how this period of decline in management of the area has affected a whole array of species beyond grouse.
Yeah. Like the curlew, for example, they're in the curlew population in Northern Ireland is it's hit rock bottom.
It's worth pausing on curlew for just a moment. I don't think that there is a bird in the uplands which brings a bigger smile to my face than when I hear the call of the curlew. It is one of our most rapidly declining breeding birds and has shown a 46% decline across the United Kingdom between 1994 and 2010. The species was added to the UK Red List in December 2015, and it is argued to be the bird of greatest conservation concern here. We hold a fifth of the world's curlew over winter, and around a quarter of the world's breeding pairs in spring and summer. So what happens to curlew here has substantial consequences for the future of the species. There are a myriad of reasons for their decline, and a lot of this is focused around land use changes, as is true of many species around the world. But they enjoy a haven of respite in managed grouse moors in particular, which have some of the highest breeding densities in the country. And this has been proven time and time again, even with collaborative research. It is worth checking out a paper from 2010 by Fletcher and his colleagues, which reported on an 8-year study into the effects of controlling predators for ground nesting birds. They showed that with lapwings, golden plover, and curlew, they fledged more than 3 times as many young when predator control took place than when it didn't. And if you'd like to read this full paper, originally published in Applied Ecology, you can find the link in the show notes on our website, thepacebrothers.com.
There's only a few pairs that are fledging, a very low number of chicks. We have a huge success story here because of our upland management and grouse management. The curlew flourish here. It was only just back in 2017 we had our first successful nest of curlew. And that was the first time curlew had fledged chicks successfully off the estate in 20 years.
That's crazy. 20 years.
20 years, yeah.
And because of predation?
Because predation's been that bad.
So they might have nested, but you just weren't getting. They weren't fledging.
They weren't. They were struggling to survive. They would quite easily hatch eggs. That wouldn't be the habitat was there for them. But I think, it was getting to a stage where the chicks weren't even getting, they weren't getting chance to hatch. They were just getting, as soon as a curlew would lay its clutch, there's absolutely no record, in the 20 years before that of chicks even, being recorded here, which tells us that they probably weren't even getting to chick stage.
Wow. And you were also telling me something interesting about merlins today as well.
Yeah.
Which is an incredibly small, agile little bird of prey that most people probably have never seen. Yeah,
so the merlin, as you know, is one of the smallest birds of prey in the world, and are predominantly or always known historically to be a ground nesting bird.
A bit like hen harriers.
A bit like the hen harrier. So one of the very few bird of prey species that actually nest on the ground. In Northern Ireland, it's been they found very few merlin nests at all, probably due to the level of predation. Merlins obviously are also not safe to be able to defend their young or defend their clutch.
Yeah, because foxes and rats and corvids will take a nest of merlin or hen harriers just the same as they'll raid a nest of curlew.
Yeah, that's right. They still provide a meal for carrion. So what's been recorded over the recent years is merlin is starting to use old crow nests actually in trees. There hasn't actually been a ground nesting pair of merlew recorded in Northern Ireland for the past 20 years.
That's crazy.
So,
and yet in other parts, like on Scotland and England, where you do find merlin, it'll predominantly be ground nest.
Yeah, all the time. The management's there. It's been there for 100 plus years, so it's never been an issue for them. Whereas here they seem to have adapted.
It's amazing how nature will find a way. And we were discussing this earlier. I wonder whether that's just the birds that survived were the ones that, for whatever reason, decided we're going to make a nest in an abandoned crow nest. And so the fledglings from that nest had that kind of imprinted in them, and that's where they went back to nest.
Yeah.
And the ground nesting birds just didn't survive. Yeah. Merlin are a freaking cool little bird. So little, in fact, that they are the UK's smallest bird of prey. In winter, the population that we have here increases dramatically as we get most of the Icelandic breeding birds migrating to our warmer climate. Although the population has recovered from its crash in the late 20th century, it's still on the red list of species. Currently, we have recorded between 900 and 1,500 breeding pairs in the UK. Males can weigh as little as 125 grams, which isn't even the weight of half this can of Coke that I'm holding in my hand right now. Hen birds do weigh a little bit more and can be up to 300 grams. Their Latin name? Falco columbarius.
Even the hen harrier, for example, they're in the same situation with the level of like predation. They're not doing very well either.
Do you have them here?
We struggle in the whole of Northern Ireland to have any successful nests of hen harrier. I think it's 94% of nesting hen harriers all fail due to predation.
That's an insane statistic.
Yeah.
That's to survive with a 94% mortality rate due to predation before you've even had a chance to go and start like hunting for yourself.
Yeah.
Isn't a really great place to start.
Yeah.
I suppose this is probably a good place to stop to paint a picture of what this project is. So we know that it was historically managed. There'd been this long sort of fallow period with very little management going on. And I think that's true across almost all of Northern Ireland, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So where we're sitting right now, which is the basis for the application for the Conservation Purdey Awards, how did it start? What's the history behind this 5,000 to 7,000 acres and 1,000 odd acres of grouse moor that you are essentially responsible for managing?
Yeah. Originally, it all started back in 2007 when red grouse in the whole of Ireland became a red listed species.
Which is a different species to the one we have. It's very closely related, but it is distinctly different.
That's right. It's actually quite controversial because there's a debate whether the Irish grouse are a subspecies or not. A lot of people would say that they're the same as the Scottish bird, but
to look at them, which I saw one today just as we were driving, I couldn't tell any difference.
Yeah, in appearance, there's absolutely there's no difference.
I dug into the taxonomy of grouse a little bit for this, and to be honest, it's still not that clear. Red grouse in the mainland, which is where I'm used to seeing them, Lagopus scoticus, is a subspecies of the European willow grouse, but the Irish grouse is argued to have enough genetic separation to warrant being identified as a subspecies, although there are some people who disagree with this. And their Latin name, Lagopus hibernica.
Yeah, haven't quite put my finger on it yet, but there's just something something a little bit different. So, going back to how the project was originally founded, Lord Dunluce, he owns the shooting rights for the entire estate. So he and his father, they always used to shoot grouse here back in the 50s and 60s, and they're extreme countrymen and conservationists. They've always had a strong love for the conservation that exists on shooting estates and up on the moors. So he decided that he wanted to do something about the depleted grouse population, and he felt as though he was he was going to be the sort of the main driver in reviving the grouse population, and he's done extremely well so far. And him and his friends, there's maybe 6 of them now, 6 originals anyway. Peter Mackey, who's now the chairman, he is also one of the main drivers as well. He's really taken this project from where it started to where it is now, there's been a lot of money put in, to get a project to where it's come from to here now. Unfortunately, there has to be a lot of money involved. So, they've done so much for not just the grouse, but for the whole biodiversity, on the project. That it's the success here truly lies with them. So they decided that they needed a grouse-keeper. The only way of reviving the population, they knew there had to be some form of habitat management and predator control.
Because they'd had like 50, 60 years of nothing.
Yeah.
And being able to see what the outcome of that was.
Yeah, that's right. Huh. And they know that the professionals of the uplands, the guys who really know how to manage moorland are grouse keepers. So that didn't take too much deciding for them at all. They put their heads together and like, right, we need a keeper. So they employed a keeper from Scotland, and he come over, and he really got the project going. He put a lot of effort in. For example, the burning, he really did get stuck into that, and the predators, he did extremely well. Thermal imaging wasn't a popular, it wasn't the kind of tool that was affordable back in 2010.
Yeah.
So he was managing just on his own, using old-fashioned methods, just with the lamp and the odd snare and things like that. And the project started to take off, and each year through the pair counts, through the summer brood counts, each year the counts went up. They went up slowly, but the directors of the IGCT knew that it wasn't going to be a quick turnaround.
Yeah, especially with 5 pairs as a starting point.
Yeah. I mean, they knew it was going to be a long, drawn-out process, and it could be possibly, a 10-year period until they started to get anywhere near where they would where they were aiming to be. So, yeah.
It's a massive undertaking.
Yeah.
So just paint a picture of the landscape here for people, and the kind of terrain that's here, because although I haven't managed to see that much of it today because of the weather, I've seen little bits of heather, but it's not, where I come from on the east coast of Scotland, it has been managed as such for many, many, many years. Yeah. So when you look at that hillside, it's very distinctive heather moorland, whereas here it's way more broken.
Yeah.
You can see a lot of the impacts of agriculture and grazing by sheep, which you're working to correct and restore, especially with regard to forestry. So what are you doing with regard to land management in that way?
Land management, it's there's a lot of things that we're involved in at the minute. So
I've lost track today as you've been telling me all the things.
Like here, it's a very heathery mixture of grasses. It's a very heathery, grassy moorland. We do like the grasses. It provides a lot more insect life for chicks than a solid bed of heather would, and the sheep obviously benefit from that as well. So we can we can manage the hill to suit both livestock for the farmers as well as the grouse, the golden plover, the curlew, the lapwing, and the snipe. Heather burning, that's always been like a key tool. Anytime it's dry, we then go out and carry out burning. That's absolutely essential.
Why is that? Just to explain that process. I think it's not necessarily well understood. People see, the hills are on fire again, every season. And, for people who don't understand it, it looks just destructive.
Yeah, I mean, the main reason why we burn, we need fresh heather to come. We need fresh heather to come through. An old 10, 15-year-old bed of heather would hold absolutely no nutritional value in at all. Other than cover, that would be the only benefit of it, which we also do need as well. Our aim is not to eliminate all long heather, but we burn patches which might maybe an acre or 2 acres in size, and we burn like a patchwork effect throughout the hill. So what that does is it creates multiple territories for grouse, but the golden plover, any breeding wader also benefits from that as well. It creates a foraging habitat for the likes of nesting or wintering golden plover. Even the curlew chicks can forage through it. A curlew chick would really struggle to walk through a real high, dense bed of heather. The sheep as well also benefit from it as well, and we can also use that to our advantage, because when we do put the sheep out on the hill, we don't want them to just sit and graze round the gate. The burning also it attracts fresh growths of grass as well. So there's a lot more nutrition in the grass that's come back through from the fresh fires. So that also, with the patchwork effect, spreads the sheep out throughout the entire hill as well.
Why do you want sheep on the hill?
We need sheep there to graze the grass. The problem is because it is a very grassy, heathery mix. If we were to manage the hill, for example, if we were to burn an acre-size patch of heather, the grass would be the first to come through.
So it would sort of smother out the heather.
Yeah, so we need the grass to be grazed in order for the heather to come through, you see. And also for example, a grouse chick would be no bigger than an egg, and if the hill was covered in real tall, tight knitted grass,
it can't get around.
It couldn't get through it. So
okay, so you have this give and take relationship between sheep being on the hill for purposes of livestock production. And what you're trying to achieve in terms of biodiversity and habitat. That's
right. The heather burning and the sheep grazing, it coincides with each other, and it's that's our management tool. That's what sort of makes us look slightly different to what your other moors would be managed in the mainland.
And you were telling me just before we move off sheep, you were telling me something interesting about a study which had been done on sheep, which actually facilitated you changing the breed that you had out on the hill, which I thought was fascinating when you showed me the map.
Yeah, so there was a lot of trials that had went on, different experiments with different breeds of sheep, and they found that the pure Scottish blackface actually suited the hill a lot more than what the Texel blackface crosses did. So we'd radio collared a flock of blackface ewes and radio collared a flock of Texel cross blackface ewes, and we'd put them out onto the hill, and what we got every 30 minutes was different dots of where the sheep were, and we found that the pure Scottish blackface actually grazed the hill a lot more. They spread out a hell of a lot more, whereas the crosses, they were just basically waiting at the gate.
So they were just lazy.
They were just lazy. Yeah, they didn't like getting their feet wet.
Yeah, and when you visually see it on the map with the blue and red dots that you showed me, it was just so obvious.
Yeah.
You just had this densely packed blue dots all around where essentially they'd been kicked out on the other side of the fence, and then this pretty dispersed series of red dots, which was the Scottish blackface, across the whole area. Yeah,
it was something.
Whose idea was that, by the way?
It was Caffrey's. They have a team of sheep technologists.
Caffrey's being?
Caffrey, sorry. Yeah, they are essentially the Department of Agriculture. Okay. And they were interested. It was them that really wanted to try this out, and it was a brilliant idea. And
have you? How long ago was that you switched?
That was 5 years ago.
And do you think you've been able to see a difference?
Yeah, definitely. We always monitor our fresh burnt areas anyway.
Okay.
Most of my time is spent walking around the hill, looking at fires, looking at work that I've done, especially, looking at fires that I've burnt maybe a year ago or 6 months ago, just to have a look at the new growth. And one of the things that I'll be doing whilst I'm out there is monitoring the grazing as well. So, for example, if I think that the sheep have spent enough time out on the hill and they've grazed enough, possibly they might be overgrazing it, I would then speak to the shepherd and say, could we please take the flock off the hill now? And then we would keep them off for maybe a couple of months, maybe 4 months, and then we would put them back out again to do the exact same job.
This is being done in collaboration with a lot of research, a lot of testing, which you're involved in, and your various government departments are involved in, and other NGOs. Explain that relationship that you have, because I think it's rather unique, and I think with a view to management, particularly in the uplands, moving forward in other parts of the country. I think it's something that we could definitely learn from, and I dare say it probably played a role in you guys winning the Purdey Award. This fantastic relationship that you seem to be able to balance, which can or has caused conflict in the past in other places, in other parts of the country.
At Greenmount, on Glenwerry Farm, we have a board called the Glenwerry Hill Regeneration Project, and it's a multi-partnership project. So all the work that we do up here is it's monitored by the likes of AFBI. RSPB come in to monitor the breeding wader population, not just the breeding wader population, but also the songbirds as well, the meadow pipits and the skylarks. So we really rely on RSPB to carry out the bird surveys and tell us how many breeding waders we have, and they're the professionals. They really know how to survey. We have the Northern Ireland Raptor Study Group, so they would come in the springtime and they would carry out surveys for hen harrier or merlin. They would even keep an eye out for the odd red kite and things like that.
And that was the group that you got the information about the merlins.
That's right. Yeah. So they're actually they're quite good to work with. And
they promote predator control, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. They're spending most of their time travelling all through Northern Ireland just to monitor hen harriers and merlin. Their experience over the past, say, 15 years, they have seen predation taking the lives of so many hen harrier chicks or merlin chicks. They know that predation is a problem, and for example, the successes of the project here at Glenwerry, where we've been carrying out pretty intense predator control, they know predator control is key to the survival of any ground nesting bird.
So they're seeing the benefits of the work that you're doing on the ground.
Yeah.
It must be hard for them in other parts of the country where they're trying to achieve what is clearly being achieved here. But you have the resources by virtue of the trust that funds you and all the equipment that is around here and anyone else who's involved or employed throughout the season to do these activities. But in other parts of the country where this predation is taking place in just the same way, I guess they must struggle to fund that predation control.
It just doesn't exist yet.
Okay. So they just have to watch it and...
Yeah. One of the main objectives of the IGCT is to promote moorland management. We don't just want Glenwerry to be the only moor in Northern Ireland to have a large number of grouse. We want to promote this and push it out to other organisations, to other landowners. And
so with this as a kind of model of collaborative working, about how you can achieve this.
This is a prime example of good partnership working, the benefits of predator control and habitat management. It's definitely not easy. Not everyone could do it, but I think it has to be replicated elsewhere because our hill to have 65% of the grouse population in the whole of Northern Ireland.
It's crazy.
It's crazy, and
on what is essentially 1,000 acres of prime.
Yeah, and I dare say that there are more suitable areas in Northern Ireland. There are places. There's hills elsewhere that are absolutely stunning for a grouse-keeper to look at, and to see that it's unmanaged.
The potential is there.
The potential that's there. It's mouth-watering for myself, but as well as devastating at the same time, to look at and think, that place could be absolutely heaving with wildlife. There should be curlew there should be grouse, there should be everything there. Everything's there. It's just not managed for it.
We got sidetracked talking about, I can't remember, onto something, but one of my thought processes earlier about something I wanted to ask you about, or certainly to describe, was how the landscape has been degraded in that sort of previous 50 years. Like one example that we were looking at today as we were driving around, and we were seeing little remnants of where there used to be heather moorland, and then that's just it, like literally a couple of plants, and then pretty uninteresting grassland all the way until you get into the sort of heather moorland again, with big drains cut through it, which is now just short grass used for grazing. But that would have historically been open heather moorland.
Yeah, there's areas here, Ballybowley Forest, which sits on the south side of the hill. That's nearly 1,200 acres, and that used to be all heather moorland. It was probably one of the best hills in the Glens of Antrim. Unfortunately, the forestry was planted, and that just destroyed the habitat. There's also areas where farming has been brought into it, and the farming practices have changed so much from back in the 50s to now. It's a lot more intense now, and there were grants actually given to farmers to bring heathery hills into grazing pastures. So there's been so much heather moorland, so much habitat lost just to more intense farming practices.
It's worth highlighting here one of the great tree planting travesties in Scotland. For thousands of years, the flow country was largely untouched. Now, this is an area in northern Scotland around Caithness, if you want to find it on a map. But during the 20th century, vast improvements of technology meant that this land, which was basically a bog and seen as barren and useless in terms of agricultural production, could suddenly be drained and trees could be planted on it. To help encourage this, there were government tax incentives at the time during sort of the 70s and 80s, and this led to a big increase in forest planting, and large areas of this bog, which had been treeless for thousands of years, was drained with deep furrows cut into the peat to reduce the water table and planted in fast-growing conifers. Today, by and large, all of these plantations have failed. There was never supposed to be trees planted on blanket bog, and they never really produced any economic timber. The only thing they did manage to do was destroy vast areas of a very fragile ecosystem. As far as I know, most of these plantations have now been removed, and the Scottish Government has dedicated £8 million to help restore some of Scotland's peatlands. Their ambition is that this restoration work will help reduce the country's greenhouse gas emissions by locking carbon into the environment. What will be interesting to see is how this view sits along their new tree planting targets. Hopefully, the lessons of the past have been learnt. And there was draining as well. I mean, I think we saw some of that today.
Yeah.
I mean, that's true in Scotland, it's true in England as well, where you can see that.
The draining's so bad here. There's two reasons. The hill, there's so much water coming off the hill, and originally the hill was a bog as such, and they needed the hill to be drier, they needed the ground to be dry in order for the grass to grow a lot quicker. And also the drains that have been put in are just grips, and they're quite deep grips. And
which are just straight channels.
Just straight channels, and they could be every 30, 40, up to 50 metres on each sort of row. And that creates a huge hazard for any ground nesting bird as well.
Of course, falling in it,
and they're also restricted to one area.
Yeah, because they can't cross it until they get big enough.
Exactly. So that's also been one of the things that we've done up on our own hill as well, because there has been grips put in years and years ago. So what we'd done, we'd actually covered those grips up. In some areas, we'd blocked them up to slow the water down.
So restoring how it would have more naturally been.
Yeah.
Retaining water on the hill.
Yeah, just to try and keep the water up there. We need water for the grouse as well. We do like a lot wetter areas. That's so much more beneficial to any chick, not just grouse, but those wetter areas that hold a lot of sphagnum, they produce so much more insect life, and that's absolutely crucial, especially for grouse, because grouse, they predominantly survive on insects, invertebrates, for up to 2 to 3 weeks.
So that's essential.
Yeah.
Without that, you won't have grouse.
Yeah, exactly.
That's interesting because, one of the things that we've seen, particularly recently on social media and in the news, is this emphasis on trying to restore peat bogs.
Yeah.
But the way that it's talked about, it's often in a way that, well, if you have managed grouse shooting, it's at the detriment of peat bogs.
Yeah.
That's how it's being discussed in the media, but the way that you're just describing it now, this is a vital bloodline for you to be able to produce grouse.
Exactly.
Which is obviously, that is one of the main drivers. We've already talked about a lot of the spin-off benefits of that, but it's obviously a main driver.
Well, this is hugely controversial, but it was never gamekeepers that drained moorland.
Shock horror.
So, that a lot of people would blame, especially at the minute because the weather's been so bad and people have been getting
flooding. Yeah.
There's areas that's been getting flooded and grouse keepers are getting the blame. But there's actually no evidence of the likes of heather burning or our management process having anything to do with the flooding. Basically, when it rains a lot, it floods. It doesn't take a genius to work that out.
Only last week, I had a chance to speak with Andrew Gilruth from the Game and Wildlife Conservation Trust, and I asked him this very question about flooding. This is what he had to say.
Yeah, and that's understandable, because whenever there's any terrible incident, the first thing that people want to do is to find something to blame. It's normally either the Environment Agency or someone that's been managing the land around them. But in actual fact, when the EFRA, the Environment Select Committee at Westminster, investigated flooding after the floods on the Somerset levels, they actually looked nationally at flooding. And not only did they not find any evidence that burning and grouse moors are causing flooding, nobody even presented any evidence to them. And I've been back through all the paperwork. Nobody presented any evidence that was actually even the case. So it's quite a new idea. And it is just an idea. There isn't actually any substantial evidence that it does cause flooding. So if there are effects, it might well just be localized effects, in which case you need a local solution.
But also, like we were just saying just a few minutes ago, all the grips and drainage that was put in for agriculture from around the 70s, that certainly will have contributed to taking water off the hill quicker.
Yeah, definitely. The gamekeepers, we need water up there. Especially for a dry summer, for example. Even back in 2018 was the driest spring we'd
4 months
ever had.
Of no rain almost,
and it was absolutely devastating for the biodiversity. The wildlife just suffered extremely badly. It was so dry up there that the invertebrates, there was no insect life at all. So what we've been doing for 10, 15, 20 years, we've been blocking drains to try and hold the water back up there, to try and create a wetter bog in order for invertebrates to flourish there. And also the benefit is that the ground nesting birds also have a food source for 3 weeks after first hatching.
Just going back to forestry, you were talking about some of the moorland that's been lost as a result of planting. When we were driving around, there's a lot of pine forests which have been felled, and you're returning that to heather moorland.
Yeah.
Is this part of study and research? Because in lots of other parts, like if you listen to the discussion that is really hot right now in Scotland, it is that we need to be planting more trees, and yet you guys just cut down a bunch.
Yeah.
So how does that work?
Well, the main reason why we had taken the forestry down was we were actually losing more carbon with the trees being there. The carbon, with the biodegraded carbon, was actually running through the drains that were put in through the eroding peat within the forestry.
The question of sequestering carbon in this dwarf shrub heath and peak bog ecosystem is a complex matter. So complex, in fact, that despite the fact I've consumed at least 15 scientific papers on it, it seems that more research is needed to fully comprehend the trade-offs as we deliberate tree planting initiatives and the use of burning for management and the risk of wildfires in this landscape. I am writing a whole feature on this in the next issue of Modern Huntsman, Volume 5, which actually you can pre-order now. Go and check out modernhuntsman.com if you're in the US, and the rest of the world, go over to thepacebrothers.com and you can get your order in now and read the outcome of all of the research that I've been doing on this very thing. Okay.
We've now removed 175 hectares of forestry up there, which is going to be completely re-wetted. There's going to be a lot of drain blocking up there, so we're trying to keep as much water up there as we possibly can. There's going to be 3 different trial plots, so there's going to be a little bit of ground smoothing, which is where we level all the furrows, which are in between where each tree has been planted, and then there's going to be other bits as well. The higher ground is going to be reseeded back to heather, so that will create not just one habitat but multiple habitats for multiple different species.
But this isn't just you doing it here with the trust. You're going to have science and people studying this to find out what the long-term implications of this action are.
Yeah, exactly. At the minute, we have 2 PhD students here. This is probably the most scientific thing that we've done here so far. It's quite a biggie. This forestry we've been trying to take this out for 10 years, mainly because there's been so much issues come out of the forestry. The forestry should have never been planted. The trees weren't actually growing anymore because they were planted in the wrong place. So
as a harvestable crop, it probably wasn't worth that much anyway.
The trees that are there now they're not worth anything, and they never were going to be. Within 10 or 15 years, it would have just been a forest full of dead trees, essentially.
Windblow mess.
Yeah. Which is already the trees were still standing, and the predators that it was housing in there was causing a lot of issues for ground nesting birds. I dare say even now the forestry's only been cleared. They've just finished just nearly a week ago, and just since myself seeing the process of the trees coming down, I've already seen more grouse this winter than I have previous winters, and I think that's just due to the fact that the forestry has been constantly, there's been disturbance in there from the machines taking it down, and obviously it's got smaller and smaller. So the predator issue, I wouldn't say has gone altogether, but it's definitely lessened.
And hopefully in a few years' time, some of these big questions are going to be answered. This is the studying that's going on as to, is this a better way to sequester carbon, for example, or is it? Have you improved water quality as a result of it? These are the kind of questions that they want to answer.
Yeah, because it's an experiment, and we're trying to take like multiple things from it. We're trying to we will get better water quality without a doubt. But the biggest thing is the carbon. So we're trying to, because there's quite a lot of exposed peat in there, and there is some dry areas, obviously, because there's been tree planted there, so the water's not got the water table's got that low. We need that to become essentially a bog again. So we need the sphagnum to flourish in there again. Sphagnum, as you know, holds, it's nearly a carpet or a
sponge, isn't it?
Yeah, blockage for carbon. So there's a lot to come out of it yet, and I think there's so much that we don't quite understand yet, but that's why we experiment with the different things.
Fantastic. Are there any other studies or research that has either gone on while you've been here in the past, or they're working on in the future? One of
the most important ones was the vegetation monitoring, which is carried out by AFBI, and we're quite lucky to have Dr. Jim McAdam, and he's one of the leading scientists in AFBI, and he's been here for years. He's seen the place in its highs and its lows. What AFBI do is they carry out the vegetation monitoring for the entire hill. So they would also monitor the grazing regimes, monitor the fires that we do, the patchwork effect. Every single fire is GPSed, and
so they're actually analysing your muir burn.
They're studying the regrowth, the regeneration of burnt heather, not just burnt heather, but also the different species of grasses as well. And they'd done an outstanding report, and they had shown us on paper. This was a 5-year document, and they'd been monitoring the effects of blanket bog and heather burning, and the end result was that there was no effect whatsoever on the blanket bog with heather burning.
That's interesting, and I should caveat this with saying there'll be people going, yeah, but you can't burn on blanket bog anyway, but you guys had exemptions for this for scientific testing.
Yeah, that's right. Because it's a demonstration farm, we're trying to find the best methods of managing heather, and also heather blanket bogs as well.
Yeah. And this is independent research.
Yeah.
Amazing. I want to speak a little bit about your background, because we've kind of skipped over the fact that I assumed that you were already here. You're obviously a gamekeeper.
Yeah.
Where did you start? Was it something you always wanted to do? Because now you're involved in something which is kind of at the forefront of research and analysis and management with regard to grouse, across the UK. I bet you never saw yourself in the position you're in now a decade ago.
No, to be honest, I never imagined myself to be the only grouse keeper in Northern Ireland at any stage.
That's quite a title.
Yeah. I originally I started at Strines, which is it's quite commonly known as Bradfield Moor in the Peak District, and I actually trained there. I did a college course through Bishop Burton College, and that was 11 years ago now. So ever since I left school, I was 15 when I actually started out on the grouse. So I did my training, and I was an apprentice while I was there, and I actually lived in a caravan for 2 years whilst I was serving my apprenticeship, and it wasn't just your typical static caravan. It was a tow along. We're going out for the weekend type of caravan.
So it wasn't exactly homely.
No, not exactly, but
it didn't put you off.
It was the best. It was the best thing ever. It was the best thing ever. There was some mornings it was that cold. My curtains on the caravan window were actually stuck to the inside of the caravan. It was. I mean, it was rough at times, but I was maybe 15 or 16 years old.
Yeah,
it was
you're
the
just
best thing
lapping it
ever.
up.
Yeah,
Independence.
I'd left home with no GCSEs and.
Oh, really?
So
you didn't bag any?
Yeah, no. I did terrible.
So school was not your thing.
No, not exactly.
Not exactly. I think that's. I want you to carry on your story, but I want to just pause for a second, because I think that says a lot about, clearly this is something which you're massively passionate about. Yeah. And I've been talking to you all day, and you've been filling my brain with information. I'm fortunate enough to speak to a lot of, very smart, very educated people on the podcast. Mm-hmm. Doctors of various different ologies.
Yeah.
And this is something that you are massively passionate about. And so despite the fact you've got this, by your own admission, this like missing part of your early education, you are massively knowledgeable about what you're passionate about, because it's what you absorb yourself in, and there's a lot to be said for that.
Yeah, it's been a huge. It has been my life. Great grouse keeping isn't a job as such. It's a lifestyle choice. It's something that I've enjoyed and I've been passionate about since a young age, and I found if you really enjoy something, you're constantly learning all the time. You don't even realize it. Yeah.
And you retain it.
Yeah.
If you're passionate
exactly.
about it.
Most of my friends, the people that I speak to, are all gamekeepers or conservationists. So 90% of my phone calls or just general conversations are about conservation or about grouse. So it quite easily rolls off the tongue.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So how did you get from that to here? Like, how did you? Because this is an amazing job.
Yeah.
To have been enlisted.
I was at Abbeystad Estate. I was working for the Duke of Westminster. And previously, before that, I was working at Moscow Estate for Jeremy Archdale. And going back to Abbeystad, I enjoyed it. It was a great place, amazing place. You're extremely well looked after, and I was very honoured to be there. I was flicking through the Shooting Times one day, and I found an advert for a single-handed grouse keeper's job, and I didn't put in for it straight away, and it was going through my head a little bit all the time. And I'd been following the Irish Grouse Conservation Trust for a while, because I'd always admired the work that they were doing, and I was very optimistic because I was only 23 at the time, and I thought, I'm not going to get. I'm too young. They'll never take me on. And I thought, I got a CV together, and I thought, I'll just send it.
See what happens.
Just send it. And within a week, I had a phone call from Adrian Morrow, and he invited me over for an interview and a little bit of a tour around. And I came over, and I really didn't know what to expect. It wasn't the landscape that I fell in love with. It was the idea of working on a blank canvas, producing wildlife from nothing.
Yeah,
it was that attracted me to the project, and I wanted to prove not just to myself but to others that I was capable of taking on such a task. A lot of people have told me, you'll not produce grouse there, or there's certain places in Scotland that people would say, they'll not produce there. But I like to think, for say Northern Ireland or anywhere else where people would have their doubts, if you can produce grouse on an underachieving moor, or on a moor where you face multiple challenges, you can produce grouse anywhere, to the highest standard as well.
Now, talking of Adrian, we've actually got a meeting very soon.
Yeah.
So I'm just, as a way to wrap this podcast up and take it back to where our conversation started, winner of the Purdey Awards. What does that mean to you and to this whole operation here, to have received, like, well, for a start, just like what did you physically get from Purdey, and what do you think it means in terms of like the status that has achieved?
It means so much, especially for the directors of the Irish Grouse Conservation Trust, because they've been putting money into this for a large number of years now, and we really want to now we're in the sort of success stages of the project. We've really turned the place round, and there's so much coming out of it now. We really want to show people, and the Purdey Award was a perfect opportunity of getting this thing out there and getting it publicised a little bit more. We want the place to be recognised elsewhere. Not just Ireland, but obviously England as well. And the Purdey Award really puts us alongside some of the big estates. For example, the Roxburgh estate, they'd got the silver, and to be in the same league as them is just it's amazing. It's an amazing feeling.
That's great. Well, biggest of congratulations. It was awesome to see everybody smiling on the night, because I was there in London. It's been great wandering around with you today. Tomorrow the weather is going to be better. I have every faith in the weather forecast. So I'm going to see a little bit more of the hill. Yeah. We're going to do a bit more photography, and I'm looking forward to writing up the story for Modern Huntsman. So thanks very much for your time, Alex.
Oh, thank you.
And that's a wrap. Join me in 2 weeks' time, where we will all take another walk into the wilderness.